What's up, Surf City? Coach Anthony, Coach Doug here. We're here to talk to you today about what barriers are you putting up in your life?
So it's going to be our Motivational Monday for our 10-minute talk, our 10-minute talk.
All right, guys. Just like we said in the intro, we're going to be talking today about what limiting factors or what things are you placing in front of something that's that's stopping you from actually making progress towards your end goal. There's something that you want within your life, could be within your fitness, within your business, or your career, or even in your family that you might put in limiting barriers in front of yourself. So kind of a small example is that a while back, I wrote a blog post on you have to get in shape before you get in shape. We hear that a lot. So that getting in shape before even starting doing a program like what we do here with CrossFit and just training, I have to get in shape before I even start. That I have to get in shape is a barrier. So what we're going to try to do today is kind of talk a little bit about that and find those barriers and give you examples of those barriers that you're putting in front of yourself. So Doug's made some notes about what he's.
As we were talking about what we're going to focus on today is our topic, and not necessarily. Think about barriers, sort of like the blocks you're putting up for yourself, but talking about self-imposed limitations. And I think the first one I've got here is just the dialogue that you use internally that may be preventing you from wanting to move forward towards goals or even set goals or achieve goals, and then even the dialogue that you use externally when you speak about yourself as an athlete or yourself as a husband or a wife or a business person. And the example that prompted this, Anthony was talking about. We try to encourage people to do things like competitions, come in for extra seminars, and get extra work in. And most often, the answer that we hear is what?
I'm not ready for that. So we're talking about this is that we're like, hey, a few of us are going to do a competition this weekend. It's fun for us. It's not even that high level craziness. And people are like, well, I'm not ready for that, or I can't do that yet. The thing is that talking with Doug, what I noticed was that it wasn't. No, I don't want to do that, right? So either you have two options. Either you might not be ready, and that's the truth. But you're either not being honest and not having integrity by saying, no, I don't want to do that. Or you do want to do that and you're afraid of something. So you're not really, instead of moving your whole universe towards that goal and saying, even though that I'm not exactly ready right now, I'm going to do everything I can to start moving there. So you're either way, there's lacks integrity because you're not truly speaking what you're truly feeling, right?
At no point do we hear people say, well, I don't want to compete, or I don't want to challenge myself, or I don't want to get better. What we hear is that limiting language of I'm not ready for that, or I need to do this, this, and this before I'm ready to do that. And I thought that was a very, very great point to make, just in terms of you talk about self-affirmation, just being a sort of, I think the point what you brought up was great, making that mental or emotional kind of rudder steer toward that goal that you want, and watching your whole attitude change toward what becomes possible and what you become capable of. When you start, moving yourself toward that, at least in that direction.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, it's there might be those things that you need to do before you even do them, right?
Like a muscle up we were talking about.
Yeah, and let me give that example in a second, but there might be things that you need to accomplish before you get there, but just because you say, well, I need to do this before I do that, you just don't do the work. And honestly, there's been a lot of times in my life where it's well, I'm going to try to hack this so I could be the most efficient and effective when I come down to it, I just needed to do the work to start to move forward. And many times that's come down to it. So a little bit about, I wrote a note about speech and creation. So like when the element of creation within our lives comes through the things that we speak. Okay? So like even if we go with this concept we talked about last week and one-on-one is like be, know, do, which is a big thing that the Army has. Like, so like if you want to become something, and this is how I've interpreted it, it might not be how they meant it, but be to me means you want to become something. So now in your mind, you need to become that person.
You need to be that.
Yeah, you need to be that, even if you don't externally show that, right? So once you say, this is who I am, then you're going to, like, there's going to you're going to have to find actions to align with that's who you are. So that's the knowing of it. So now you know what you need to do, and then you externally do those things, okay? So become is internal. Knowing is like the educational process of that. And then doing is executing upon that. Do the freaking work to move forward in that sense. So we were talking a little earlier about like someone who maybe is a beginner was like, oh, one day I want to do a muscle up.
Yeah.
Like as a coach, we would never have that person never touch the rings. And that's what a lot of people do with their goals. Like we'd go, here's the rings, here's what you need to do, here's the very basics, and then take them to a very easy thing where they could still accomplish that movement, but in a very, very modified environment.
In a controlled sort of, scaling it down to something that they can at least sort of, they understand the movement, they understand, they create neural pathways. Again, they're not doing it from a dead hang, but at least they start to get it.
Yeah.
They start to know, right? They start to know it and do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a practical, like, real life thing. Like, I want to do a muscle up. You know that. So I'm gonna muscle up person, right?
Right.
And then
I'm on board.
I'm
ready to get through.
Okay, coach. What do I need to know?
Like, right. Well, here's what you need to know.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you a couple of things, and now we're going to do it.
Yeah, and then you have to do it.
Absolutely.
So those simple things, and like my motivation for here speaking this is so that we can help remove, like in your lives, those barriers that you might have, because. Like, I didn't just start this just to kind of work out. Like, I wanted to help people. And one of the biggest things that we've had is, like, when people give us the opportunity to go, well, I want to go out here to this goal. Yeah. Like, we just want to help you remove barriers and move you towards that. So,
which kind of lends itself to my next note. Like, where do those barriers come from? And we had this great discussion about, we think a lot of it has to do with an element of, we're talking about motivation and kind of like, how do you affect motivation, or what affects motivation? And like the best answer we can come up with is, I think there's a strong element of fear in there. And again, like whether it's, depending on like whether you're even aware of it or not, I think like most people, like rational human beings, limitations that they set for themselves, or like, when you get into dealing with a lot of issues of confidence or motivation to do things, I think a lot of it has to do with fear of something. And I think like some of the big ones that we see, not just in CrossFit, but I think in life, again, fear of failure is huge, almost as huge or just as big as, I think a lot of because it's hard to remove the ego from certain situations. I think fear of embarrassment is a big one. Again, like having other people see that you are not as good as you think they are, or whatever, however you want to interpret that. But fear of embarrassment, and then finally, fear of injury I think is a pretty
Well, I think like there might be a fear of injury, but that might be that. I think there's things that we throw out, like trump cards that we throw out, like, oh, I'm afraid I'm gonna get hurt. But like,
yeah,
I don't know, like,
are you?
Yeah, are you really? I mean, like, I think like if it meant enough to you, like that fear of getting hurt, because we're, unless you're gonna be like tiptoe dancing in a bed of knives, like,
right.
Or like doing, or I don't know, like something ridiculous. But like, ask yourself, what are you afraid of? But like, What are you truly afraid of? You might be saying you're afraid of like getting hurt, but what are you truly afraid of? Like, like there's something that, oh, we're afraid of commitment, but we that's thrown around there a lot. Are you afraid of not executing, not following through with what's happening over there?
So rather than be seen as trying and failing, you're just gonna go ahead and not try.
Yeah,
it's just easier to be like, well, no. You're like, it's like, at least I know. Yeah, there's like a step in there someplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I think I want to question people what they've said is about, oh, you're free of embarrassment from other people, but I think you dig deeper than that. Like some people really care what other people think about them, but like it's more about letting yourself down. And the more you can get authentic, and that's one of the aspects of this is like getting more authentic with yourself. Well, you'll have more integrity with yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So like, and that's part of the biggest thing is like truly identifying how you are aware. It's improving your emotional intelligence.
I think it ties really, really well into just sort of like the kind of viewing it through the lens of what we do here at Surf City, where again I think like a major linchpin in sort of getting people to overcome that fear of embarrassment or failure, whatever it has to do with just the fact that everything we do here is done in a group setting. There's very, very few things. I mean, yes. I mean, we're constantly saying, it's about your personal goals and sort of where you started off and where you end up, and sort of the journey along the way. But just also that comfort zone of knowing that very, very few things that you do in the space of an hour here at the gym is going to be done by yourself. It's shared adversity. It's that sense of community and that sense of encouragement that comes from, hey, we both suck at this.
Yeah.
But we're going to get better together. I think that can be a huge linchpin.
Well, there's two things a part of that, right? There's everything that everybody talks about, and kind of like it's like everybody knows is like, well, you have people that have been there and they're there to support you, and that's great. We all know that. We know how powerful our community is in church and in school, in an environment like this. But what comes in with that people don't talk about is submission. And too many times when people don't want to submit to the process, submit to just saying, look, I don't know this, and then being authentic and true with themselves. So I'm going to submit to something I'm going to submit to the process. I'm going to allow people to lead me.
Yeah.
And too many times people are like, no, I should know this because it's a pride thing and it's something that's within themselves. I've experienced it a number of times when I said, well, I've got this, right? Instead of like, no, we need to get this, right? And there's that thing that you aren't enough. Like I've had that conversation, like, and even mentors say, well, no, you need to do more of what you need to do. Like put in everything on myself instead of knowing that, like, the fifth level of leadership that's talked into Good to Great, it talks more about like when you're a level 5 leader, you kind of go, here you go, like let other leaders step
right.
up.
And actually, I had this conversation with somebody yesterday. He was talking about when you get to a point where if you, and this is from a business standpoint, but like if you really, really want to grow your business and see your business explode, you there's a shift where you stop focusing on this like your own book of business, and what you start doing is you start focusing not even on your subordinates' book of business, but just focusing on your subordinates and focusing on your employees and making sure that they have everything they need in order to succeed. And that is when most entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs see things explode.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and I always like to take these business books and take them back because I'm here to influence. We're here to influence people with fitness. So it's like, like I did a quick thought on Facebook about successes and submission. So like I've like the more I study human nature, behavior, watching people succeed, reading like the Bible, reading other like religious books and stuff like that, there's this element of human nature that needs to submit, right? There's leadership, there's things, but at every level, there's something like a high level leader is, a lot of times they have a spiritual submission. So they have a higher calling. So they're submitting to that no longer is involved with themselves. So they take it outside of themselves and anything else. So this kind of, kind of segued off into something else, but what we're talking about is looking at those limiting barriers and everything. So, what I want you guys to do is kind of like put in the comments, reflect a little bit, and what are some barriers that you didn't need to put in front of yourself that you did that have not allowed you or slowed your progress? Because I've had one in the past, like 3 months. It's like I just went and did something, just kind of like was like, I'm throwing all this stuff out and stop trying to efficiently hack it, right? That's my thing, is I want to make it the most efficient and run the most smoothly. And sometimes the times when I step back and I try to like do it from here without any action, without being in it, like efficiency comes from doing the action. Like you can't just sit back and watch video and go do a movement better. Right? You've got to get into the movement. It's a yin and yang of the thing of like cerebrally taking it in and then doing. And cerebrally taking it in and doing it.
Sort of manifesting that thought into action. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, just to kind of, we'll kind of wrap it up here, but we were talking about be, know, do, and I just thought of this. Like one of my favorite authors, Chuck Palahniuk, and I think there's this line he has where we're talking about fear of failure and we're talking about fear and self-confidence, and basically his whole thing was figure out like what scares you the most, or figure out what you're afraid of, and then his quote was, and then go live there. Like figure it out what you're afraid of, and then go live there. And I think like just being able to sort of like just the internal brain rewiring and the emotional kind of rewiring that comes from putting yourself into that, like with just knowing that like you may fail, but most likely you'll succeed, or just sort of like I said, like be, know, and do. That can be hugely helpful to growing not just as an athlete but also as a person.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, like what can you do today that you're afraid of and that's been a barrier that you can just move past? Maybe you just run right through that and do that action that you're afraid of, or commit to that and start saying start doing those actions, and overcommitment's another thing, because that's even that can be a completely different topic, and that in itself is if you try to make it bigger than it is, a lot of times that's setting yourself up for success, and it's a mental barrier to actually achieving that instead of just slowly going forward. But what can you do today to start moving forward to get those barriers out of the way and face those fears that you have? All right? Till next time.
Thanks a lot, guys. Talk to you soon.
For more info, tips, and tricks on running or anything else involved in your fitness, go to CrossFit Surf City USA.com.